Yo, and welcome to a new video. Climbing in League of Legends is a journey, and as any journey, there are good moments and sometimes bad moments. But winning and losing are honestly two sides of the same coin, and that coin name is consistency. The more consistent you are, the more the coin will turn on the side of the good moments. Wait, never mind, that's not how probability works. Oh well, forget about that analogy. What I'm trying to say is, you need to be as consistent as possible to have the highest possible win rate. And in today's video, we'll look at some of the most neglected and important concepts. The things I'm about to talk about, of course, is my opinion, but it's backed up by years of coaching experience helping out people to reach their desired ranks, but also personal experience, things that I've improved on that helped me get to where I am today. One last thing before we start, I will try to be as concise as possible, giving you only the important information that you need without going too in-depth, since this video will end up being too long otherwise. I hope you enjoy the video. I'll start off with the more basic ones, leading into the more advanced topics. I'll group up the first segment together, since it's comprised of smaller ideas that work together to make you a more developed player and enhance your decision making. The group will be called Tracking the Game State. All of these concepts are more neglected than unknown. A lot of players don't emphasize on improving on them nearly enough, leading to gaps in their knowledge more often than you think, actually ruining your gameplay. Let's go over all of them. First off, understanding the game you're in. The moment you log in your champion and you go into a game, there's already a ton of information laid out to you. You just need to know what to look for. All of your allies and opponent's champions, for instance, yours and their strong sides and weaknesses, your individual matchup. Just to name some of it. In order to get good at making decisions, you need to first theoretically understand what you're working with and what you're aiming to achieve. Only then you can look to go into the details on how to get there. In order to get better at this, from now on, I want you to answer these questions when going into a game. How does my matchup go in all stages of the game? What is my role in this game? What is our team's win condition and what is the opponent's? And at what stage is our comp the strongest? Of course, the questions don't have to be exactly these ones. They could be other similar ones that provide you with basic understanding of the game you're currently in. The point here is that you need to be more active, even from the very beginning of the game, but also throughout the whole duration. Make sure you ask yourself questions regularly, not just in the beginning though. This way you're less inclined to autopilot and more focused on what your next move is. Next in line in this group will be gathering information. Besides the initial knowledge you can gain just by looking at the starting variables, you need to constantly gather information around you to update your understanding depending on how the game is going, and this way you'll be able to make more accurate decisions. The way you do this is by having built-in habits, such as whenever there's an opponent around you, make sure you left click them so you can see their portrait on the top left, since there's literally no downsides to this, only upsides. This is actually something I notice almost nobody does from the people I coach, when it's a really free way to get access to the opponent's HP and mana resource, inventory, and at the same time granting you information on runes that they might have, like bone plating and mana flow band. This gives you a way better understanding of what the opponent might be thinking and has to work with, and the decisions they might make given them. Example, let's say you're sitting around 50% HP and the opponent at 25% HP, but you know from previous trades that he has bone plating, and you also notice in his inventory that he has cookies. That means if you're trying to fight him and look for lethal on him, you still need to be careful, since this combination can actually allow him to win a fight against you even though you have the HP advantage. And of course, by looking your opponent's inventory, you can track abilities like Anivia egg cooldown and health potions as well, but I'm sure most people are aware of those already. Make it a habit to check top left, just as you probably have already built up a habit to look at the minimap every couple of seconds. Other habits include pressing tab more often. So basically, every time you're not fighting, look to check how the game is going. This is actually one of the habits that helped me improve the most, because it directly made me more consistent when making decisions, and this honestly goes a long way on any champion. Who's strong? Who's completed an item? Who's building what? This information might not instantly be usable, but it helps you stay more in touch with the game in general. Allows you to make more conscious decisions when choosing your targets and what to build, but also indirectly increases your consistency. The next habit that we need to talk about, which is a very notorious one, you could also work on your F keying. By F keying, it's referring to using your F1 to F5 keys on your keyboard to quickly navigate through your ally's champion's point of view. Of course, you don't necessarily have to have them bound on those specific keys. I personally have them bound on my mouse buttons. Whatever setup is most comfortable for you to make it a habit to look at what's happening around the map. It's extremely important that you gather information using this method since it helps you keep track of enemy summoner spells and big cooldowns and keep a better track of who's where currently on the map and what their intentions might be in the near future. But I use the minimap to look at situations. Do I really need to look at them with my camera as well? This is actually a very common question I get asked, and the answer is yes, because the minimap is not the full picture. You miss out on a ton of small but important things you won't be able to catch on without actually looking at it. Just as the previous advice, and it does take a little bit more effort to do, it only has positives. As long as you don't accidentally look at bot lane whilst you're getting ganked. That wouldn't be very pleasant. Now, one more thing is, I do acknowledge that not everyone wants to use the F key variant, since it can get pretty nauseous sometimes, and I do agree with that. My advice if you don't want to do it is get a habit of quickly clicking on the minimap, since just using F keys isn't the only way to look for information. F keys, however, are of course faster. Whichever route you take though, make sure you look at as many situations as possible when you're not doing anything that requires too much of your attention, and also whenever there's going to be a big upcoming fight, since any information might come in handy. The last topic in tracking the game state segment is keeping track of specifics. By specifics, I mean important champion cooldowns and summoner spells, but also some champions and items that change the way you play the game. It's extremely important whenever there's global cooldowns involved, you note them at the beginning of the game and you keep track of them throughout it, since they literally change some of the decisions you might make. The simplest example I can give here is, let's say the enemies have a Karthus and you notice that recently he hit level 6. You'll never think twice about staying on low HP and greeting for a wave if you think you're in his lethal range. So acknowledging his existence and keeping track of his ult is mandatory. When it comes to summoner spells, Flash is the most notable one, since it's a get out of free jail card in most cases. Make sure you take notice of any flash you see, but of course some flashes have bigger value than others. If you haven't seen a flash being used or your team hasn't explicitly told you that it's down, you should assume it's up, meaning that you should base your decisions off of that information. And of course you will get the occasional wrong information from your teammates, but it's fine. Of course, Flash isn't the only notable summoner spell, you should do this with all of them, but of course Flash is generally the most important. Specifics don't only include abilities. Some champions, for instance Zac, literally change how you play certain laning phases. Since his E ability lets him jump from very far, the moment he hits level 5 he can gank you from very unpleasant angles. You need to predict this by warding accordingly and being conscious about it. And sometimes even items can change the way you play the game. Let's say somebody from the enemy team has Zhonya's Hourglass, so from now on you need to take it in consideration in your calculations on whether you can actually burst someone who has it, even if naturally they're very squishy. Moving on to the next portion of the video, some not so basic concepts. But before we do that, I would really appreciate if you subscribe and like the video since it helps me out a lot. Also, feel free to join my Discord, there's a link down below, since there's free resources and a place to share your experiences. Next habit that we're going to discuss that is very neglected but still very important is called leading your team. This is a very good direct follow-up from the previous segment. A good summary for this whole concept is, provide the most important information that you acquired beforehand to your team. League is not only a game of get fed and carry. It's also a game of utilizing any resource in your favor, and your teammates, well, they happen to be a very valuable resource. Of course, the higher elo you go, the more your teammates know what to do, so you can have more trust in them. But let's be honest, in lower division most of the time your teammates have no clue what to do, so you have the moral obligation to yourself to provide them with information so they can help you out. For instance, let's say that you just had a 1v1 with the opponent very fed Caitlyn. Whether you killed her or not doesn't matter, but she ended up using her flash. Now, a dragon is about to spawn, and you, as the teamfight orientated champion you are, you see an opportunity to fight. As you're walking to the fight, there's nothing stopping you from writing, "Guys, I'm strong, we can fight this dragon. Let's be there on time and try to focus the Caitlyn, she has no flash." A very simple, yet very lead-like message. It's very important that you give any important information to your team, regardless if they use it in their advantage or not. Since I know that my champion is strong at the given time due to her nature, I was able to provide my team with confidence, but also very useful information on one of the most important enemy members. And that automatically increases your odds of winning the fight for basically zero effort. Also, utilize pings more. They're a free tool to tell your teammates what's happening in real time. The minimap is your canvas sometimes, so draw a picture with those on my way pings. Jungle tracking, a very old but popular concept, and extremely important of course, but even to this day players fail to care for it. The core of it is to always have an idea where the enemy jungler is. The way you do this is by firstly knowing what their champion prioritizes. Is it ganking or clearing their camps? Then, get information at the beginning of the game which camp they start on. And throughout the game, make assumptions where they are even if you don't see them, based on things they show you, for instance if they gank bot, mid or top lane, but also what is the most efficient thing for them to do currently. This is for sure one of the most important general concepts that you need to get good at in the early to mid game stages, since knowing where the enemy jungler is literally changes how you play the game. For instance, if you want to fight your opponent but it's 3 minutes into the game and the enemy Nocturne is clearing to topside, you might want to rethink your choice if you can't guarantee at least a 1-for-1. But if that's the case, you can actually use this information in your advantage by warding when it's appropriate and wasting the jungler's time by him attempting to gank you but you not falling for it, getting value without even killing anyone. And the last habit that you probably need to work on, that was actually the inspiration for this video, is called concealing your presence. And by its name, you might assume it only works for assassins, but no, this is a concept that any champion can technically use, but assassin-like champions for sure utilize it the best given their nature. So what do I mean? It refers to the ability to completely hide your presence from the enemy champions, so they have no way to know where you will show up next, and it gives you the element of surprise in your advantage. And at first, it might seem like a simple concept, but there's a lot going into it, especially if you play someone like Aurora. Let's look at 2 examples. In the first game, I was just able to clear out top wave. At the same time, I'm also paying attention to what's happening on the map. I was able to spot the 2 ADCs that are having a back and forward on the mid lane. I instantly decided to drop the next wave, given that my lane opponent is Vayne and I don't want to fight her right now, since I would be the one face checking her, but also my ult is still on cooldown, so it's not worth risking pushing out one more wave. Instead, I run to mid to fish for a potential pick, given the information I acquired earlier. And the moment I saw her misstep, I strike. There are 3 key points going into this play. First, acknowledging the situation, that I can't push but also that my champion's value is not in side laning for the most part. Second, paying attention to what's happening in the game so I know there's a play to be made somewhere, but also it's a good time to hide my presence. By me not showing on top lane, Jinx needed to acknowledge that I stopped pushing it and she is not allowed to step up. But also at the same time, I didn't reveal myself. Vayne isn't sure if I went back, was waiting for her to show up, or something completely different. She can't be sure exactly what I'm doing, due to me concealing my presence. And third, being fast on the move. The faster you know what to do and the faster you execute it, the less counterplay for the enemies. The second example is slightly more complicated. Me and the remaining alive members from our team are taking as much as possible from the enemy base after a team fight. Now, generally speaking, we should be going back to base to ready up for the next fight. What that means in strategy terms is we're off tempo since we need to take a reset, so the enemies are free to walk up and take some of their territory back. The moment we're out of vision, our presence is concealed, meaning that the enemies can assume where we went but can't ever be sure. Of course, their assumptions most of the time will be correct, but if you know how to abuse this scenario, you can do some cool things. For instance, like here, I know that the enemies will step up to get control of their jungle back, so it's a good time to potentially look for a kill that might lead into Baron because that's the current active objective. Sadly, we were only able to get a Karma Flash, but this is a very common timing that I'm able to abuse to get kills in a lot of my games, and it all stems from you acknowledging that the enemies are not sure what you're doing currently, aka you've hidden your presence. And that's the end of the video. Honestly, on a lot of these topics, I could expand a lot more, but I wanted to keep it simple, just to emphasize on their existence and importance. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments down below and I'll be sure to make more of this type of content. I'll see you on the next one.